I was using Nextauth, right? I remember going to their Discord and asking like, "Hey, is there anything like cleric organization for Nextauth?" And someone replied to me, "Why don't you do it yourself?" And I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do it myself."
Hello, welcome to devtools-fm. This is a podcast about developer tools and the people who make them. I'm Andrew, and this is my co-host, Jess.
Hey everyone, this is a really special episode. I'm incredibly excited for our guest today. So we have Beka on with us. So you created the Better-Auth library, and I've used it in like 4 or 5 projects now. It's a little addicting. I'm like adding auth to projects that don't need auth just so I can use the library. So we're incredibly excited to have you on to talk about your work around Better-Auth. Before we dig into that though, we would love to just hear a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I'm Beka. Actually, my full name is Bereket Engida. I am originally from Ethiopia. I right now live in the San Francisco. I learned programming actually like very recently. I think 5 years ago, and I was studying computer science back home, but I dropped out on my last year of college before finishing my study because I thought it would sound better to say like I'm dropped out than I finished like at some random school. But yeah, I learned programming and I'm the creator of Better-Auth, and I also built other like open source projects before, to name them Better Fetch, Better Call. Uh, these are the 2 ones that are somewhat known. But yeah, that's me. I'm very excited to be here, by the way. Like, super excited to chat with you all as well.
So authentication is something that I've tried to add to lots of apps. It's been hard to do. There's countless companies that offer it as a service. So can you tell us about what your experience was like with authentication before you started writing Better-Auth?
Yeah, good question. So before Better-Auth, so my first interaction with Auth was Django. So I was using Django for as my first like introduction to web dev. So while I was using Django, they have like a built-in Django Auth. It's a kind of package there. So that was like my first introduction, and I think most of us when we learn programming, especially when we learn like how to make a backend service, Auth is one of those things that needs to exist with your app, and it's something that you build, right? It's not really like even like I mean, I learned programming like 4 years ago, but even then, no one actually like teach you like, hey, you have to use that a service or anything like to implement Auth. It was actually like something that you build yourself in your backend in your service. And if you are using like something like Django, even like Laravel or all the like these like full stack frameworks, uh, backing like very mature frameworks, they already have like these primitives out of the box. So that was like my first interaction with them, and that's like what's in my mindset. Like, hey, all this is something that you implement yourself. You don't outsource that. It doesn't make sense because it's integrated to your app. Then I came into Next.js, and my first interaction was Next.auth, which actually was decent. Like I liked the abstraction. It was better than I would say like Django. Django only has the username and password, and like that was a nice experience. But Next.auth was like much better experience for me. And then I tried like Cleric, a third-party service. I tried a Passport. At my previous job, we were using Passport. I tried out Zero as well, and I also tried to roll our own auth on my previous job. Um, so I had like experience with this different technologies so far, but especially in the JavaScript ecosystem, I noticed there was like a huge shift to third-party service, especially after like Cleric came into the scene. Uh, I remember like everyone was recommending Next.auth, and just like after some time, everyone was on Cleric. For me, it never made sense to outsource my auth. Like just there are a bunch of problems with that, and then like I just never like that. So my experience with Auth was like I like Next.auth, but it had a lot of uh, things that it lacked, and a lot of things to improve. And I think the team was not full time working on that and like improving, bring out features. The docs were very lacking. But other than that, like I like the abstraction. There was Lucia. I also tried to use devtools-fm, because it's just similar to Nixauth, but it had even less features. Yeah, that was like my general experience with Auth before starting Better-Auth.
So what was the sort of like key motivator that pushed you over the point? It's like, all right, like this needs to be solved and I need to do it.
Yeah, I was working on a different project. It was actually an open source project. I was doing a web analytics platform. So basically, it was similar to PostHog or something like that. So I was doing something like that as an open source project. And I needed to implement multi-tenancy. So basically, you have like the organization feature. If you ever used like Clerk, you basically have this feature out of the box. Like you'll see, like you can have organizations, and inside them you'll have members, and the members have their own roles and stuff like that, and they will handle like sending invitation for the member, and all that stuff will be handled for you. And like multi-tenancy has been around for a while, and every SaaS application you use probably have some kind of setup like that. But when I was trying to implement that, I was using Nixauth, right? And there was literally zero solution for that, and I had to do from scratch. I remember going to their Discord and asking like, "Hey, there anything like cleric organization for Nixauth?" And someone replied to me, "Why don't you do it yourself?" And I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do it myself." But I think I built another project called the Next.org that basically adds this specific feature on top of Nixauth. But I keep just hitting wall after wall because it was never built for that. Like it was never built to be extended. So at that point, I had this idea of, hey, what if you build like a very good auth framework from scratch and has some kind of plugin system? So whenever you need these features, you just add a plugin and it will work. How secret would that be? And I thought it would be easy, but it took me like 6 months to work on, like to get like the first version out. And then at the end, like, yeah, that was like the initial thing that got me started. Also, like I had like somehow I came up with the name Better-Auth, and I thought it was sick. But then I didn't think like it would be available on Impin. So I go to Impin and then try to look up the name, and it wasn't taken. I was like, dude, this is all the same I need to start working on an auth framework.
It's funny
Start.
how many projects start because like somebody thinks of a good name and the name is actually still available and you're like, oh crap, now I
Yeah,
have to do it.
yeah. That's it. The universe giving me the sign to work on someday.
So Better-Auth is built around the plugin system, like you just said, and like it's not necessarily easy to write a general plugin system. It seems like a hard space, or not hard like generally, but like nefariously hard. Like there are these little details that are hard to get right.
Yeah.
So, did you have experience implementing like plugin systems before, or was this sort of your first time? How did you go to figure out like, okay, how do I build a good plugin system?
So I used to do music before starting programming, and in the music world, plugins are, especially if you produce music, plugins are like very essential part of your workstation. So I'm familiar with like having like a good plugin system would have like a huge dividend down the line, and also will like help with abstraction. But I didn't have like experience with making plugins, and I never made a library that has plugins or anything like that. That is the reason that it took me 6 months, right, to get the abstraction right. More than anything, that was like the hardest part. Like I rewrote the whole library 4 times, because and the 4 times was because like I needed to figure out how the plugin architecture would work. Like I was just like I'll build the whole thing, and then like again like I'll think of something that the plugins wouldn't be able to do. So now I have to do it from scratch and like figure out like how the plugins work again. So the plugins were like the hardest part, I would say, like to figure out, especially since we have like a plugin system for the client and the server, and those two things need to work. And when it comes to TypeScript, you have to also like think about like how type inference work and like how each plugin affects the type system, and all that stuff. Even like, for example, we have adapters. So whenever you want to use your own database, you can bring an adapter, and we need to figure out like how adapters would work plugin to plugin. And most adapters before us were like implementing specific queries. So we need to figure out like a more generic adapters, and need to figure out like that abstraction as well. But yeah, I think that was my experience with plugins. Like it was a bit hard to make, but finally figured out a good enough abstraction that allowed us to build a bunch of things.
Did you take any inspiration from other plugin systems as you went through this journey? Because like what you ended up with is like very similar to like other plugin systems with like hooks and befores and afters, and just find that
Yeah.
interesting.
I don't particularly call it a specific one, but I remember looking into Next NUXT, the framework. They have a plugin system. I looked through their code. I actually took inspiration from a bunch of like Laravel. I looked through like every thing that they have. I walked through even like Ruby on Rails. I tried to see like how they implement Auth. But for plugin specific, I looked through like VIT, their plugin system as well. So those are like some of the inspirations, but there was no like specific inspiration that like. But again, like I think the plugin system in general is like kind of similar. So yeah, we don't do anything like super different regarding plugins. Maybe like because we have like a very TypeScript specific thing, we do some things interestingly. But other than that, it's like similar to the other plugin architectures.
Yeah, so what are some of the challenges of supporting multiple databases? I mean, this is a feature that I've used myself, so I've like hooked it up to Prisma, I've hooked it up to Drizzle, you know, I've wrote my own, and like, it seems like it's a hard thing to do to support all these. And if you're worried about like performance and security and all the other stuff, it's like making sure you get all those right seems challenging. So how did you do it?
Yeah, I think the common way to implement adapters before us, for example, the way NextAuth or LuciaAuth was doing adapters where they will like have an interface. For example, there will be an action called find session. So that will be implemented by each adapter. So like each adapter will have like a find session. For example, you'd call Prisma to implement find session. You'll call Drizzle to create find session. So you'll have like all these ORMs and all these like adapters to create their own find session like implementation. But for us, since we have plugins, we couldn't do that because like every plugin have their own queries. So doing that for every plugin is gonna be possible, right? Just every plugin in for every adapter is unsustainable. So the way we did it was because we built another ORM on top of the ORMs. So we have like another ORM that like unifies all the ORMs. So like we have Prisma like ORM inside Better-Auth. So we use our own ORM, and then we have the adapters convert those calls to their respective adapters. That was actually a very interesting problem to solve as well because like there was nothing out there. Have you heard like do you know about Fuma docs? Fuma Fuma docs. They are a documentation framework. Have you heard of them?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, they also like have the similar use case. So we're actually like collaborating with them to make this open source and have it work for other people who want to build this type of things in the future as well. But yeah, that's like mostly how the adapter architecture works.
I've built a lot of plugin systems on TypeScript, and it's not the easiest thing to do. You have to kind of be a generics wizard to get the experience you probably want. Were there some challenges developing that part of it? Because personally, I've had lots of troubles trying to get that to be perfect.
Yeah, good question. Like, yeah, I'd say like that was one of the most challenging things about plugins. And I wasn't a wizard either. Like when I started the project, I have very basic TypeScript knowledge. Like I know generics, but I just didn't know much about it. And also like it's very hard to learn these things, right? Like there is no guide or anything like out there like to learn how, especially like when it gets complex, there is nothing out there to learn. So what I did was like I built another project. It was called Better Fetch. Uh, so that taught me a bunch of things. So like it's a very TypeScript heavy, complex types project. And while I was building that, I learned a bunch of things. And I think, especially when it comes to like TypeScript generics, the only way to learn them seems to like to do it like yourself. Just like try to just figure out yourself. Otherwise, like it's impossible to learn. Like I remember like going through every guide. Matt, right? Matt Pocock. I went through all his courses. Like I couldn't get a hand of it. Like I was like, what's happening? but but then I built like that project, and that gave me like a bunch of insight, and then I guess like I become a wizard.
Yeah, that's definitely what it feels like when you master TypeScript generics. It's like
Yeah,
I understand my code, but I know what's
I
happening.
know that's
A very weird
exactly
feeling.
exactly, yeah. and like you're very proud of it because like I think like seems very complex and you don't really also understand it, but it's doing its job. So it's like, okay, I think I'm smart.
Yeah. It is crazy how like powerful TypeScript's type system is. It's just like the expression of these really complex types is sometimes just not intuitive at all.
Exactly. Yeah. Also, it's very hard to optimize. Like if we've had like a bunch of problems, especially initially, like performance wise. So like I had to like relearn a bunch of things to actually like improve the performance and get those things right. So that by itself is like challenging, like especially like improving the performance. Uh, but even like getting the types to work is by itself also challenging.
So when you were building this out, what were the plugins that you thought were like most important to support like out of the gate? Like, okay, these things have to be like the plugins we support. And I guess maybe a similar but like different question is like, how do you determine if you should build something as a plugin or just like bake it into the framework?
Yeah, good question. So the first thing I wanted to like make work in the core, like in the core library was anything. This was like my logic. So anything you get from Nextauth, like you have OAuth, right? And then maybe you don't have email and password, but that as well. I want them to be the part of core because I don't want to introduce people to the concept of plugins from the get go, right? Like if you just want to implement continuous Google, I don't want you to like know about plugins and all this complex stuff. So like, for those type of things, I wanted to like to make it like a part of the core. But that said, one of actually the things that I really wanted to make it work is for example, we have a two-factor plugin. So the two-factor plugin, like the sign up independent doesn't the sign independent have no information about the two-factor plugin. So all the logic regarding two-factor only exists in the two-factor plugin. So for example, the same usually when you implement two-factor, it will be implemented in the sign independent, right? Like whenever they sign in, then you'll check like if they enabled two-factor, and then you don't return the session. You either actually challenge them to complete two-factor. But in our case, I wanted to make like plugins very isolated, and then whenever they are added, they only add that logic inside that specific plugin only. So, for example, in our signing implementation, there is no concept of uh, two-factor. That only exists inside of like the two-factor plugin. So we want to do this for every plugin. I think the main one, like when I started, was like the multi-tenancy. So I wanted to like organization work because I want to prove that guy like we did it. But the other one was like two-factor. Uh, the other really interesting one was like a multi-session. So you can have like two sessions in one device. I always like wondered like how people do that. Like when you use Gmail, for example, Gmail has you can like log into two different accounts at the same time. I always wonder like how that was implemented. So like I wanted to add that, and right now when we decide like whether to make something a plugin or the part of the core implementation is mostly regarding like it doesn't make sense to be a part of like a simple setup, or is this something that people want down the line, or if, when they have like a more complex setup. That's mostly like where we are.
Okay, yeah, the first question, there's a big meaty one we can talk about. So auth these days is nice and complicated. There are seemingly hundreds of ways to authenticate. Like we have passwordless email auth, we have pass keys now, we have two-factor auth, we have something called web auth n. So
Yeah.
can you walk us through the approach of like how you've added all of these different things to the framework?
Yeah. Like most of things, for example, something like passkey is a part as a plugin. So from for much part, like I'll just like whenever I need to create a plugin, I'll learn about that stuff as much as I can. If they have some kind of RFC that I can read, I'll go through that and I'll read like everything that I can get my hands on. And also I try to see implementations from other libraries or frameworks that already has done this. Especially like when it comes to auth, security is gonna be like a big factor. So you want to get these things right. Like you can't really, half like you have to actually get it right and get it correct. So like my whenever I need to implement, for example, passkeys, actually our passkey implementation relies on a library called Simple Web Auth N. It's a you probably have heard of it, but it's a popular as recommended like library. So if there's something that we can rely on, we won't try like to reinvent something that already exists. So we try to rely on that, but for many things, I would like try to learn to teach myself like through a bunch of and to go through if they have actually, especially if they have some kind of spec, I'll go through that and learn each thing and try to implement it from there, I guess.
So earlier you were saying that you're really trying to implement parts of the flow in plugins and have them also isolated. So your two-factor is like in its own plugin. The interesting and challenging thing is when you're thinking about security testing for like an end-to-end flow, that may rely on one and or more plugins and may be harder to get a better understanding of like where possible vulnerabilities could happen versus like if you're looking at, you know, the simple linear, like everything's in one file or like or whatever. So how does modularizing parts of auth into plugins change how you think about like security testing and just testing in general?
Yeah, that's a very good question because, like, again, as you said, if you add two plugins, that they just having two plugins may cause a security issue. Like maybe just having one of them that wouldn't. So this is like a more interesting problem that for us to solve. And like I wouldn't say like especially for the user side, I don't think we figured like the whole way on how testing should work when they use our framework. But for us, like one of the decisions to have like right now, we distribute all the plugins, almost all plugins through the main package. So if you want to, for example, import a specific package, you don't install another package, just inside one of the package. The reason to do that was like just we want to have everything there to be able to test them and to be able like to see like how they can work together and like doesn't cause any problems. So that was one of the decisions that we did just one package instead of like having a bunch of packages separated out. Uh, that's one of the things. Actually, we will separate them out very soon because let's say one day you have some kind of security issue with one of the plugins. We don't want you to update like the whole framework to be able to just fix one. So we're gonna roll that out soon. But the challenge is mostly like again, a combination of plugins could create an issue that you would not normally get just by using one of the plugins. We tried to solve some of that problem by like really iterating on the plugin architecture, especially for V1. We like redo every plugin architecture again. Regarding, I remember like there was an issue with like some cookies would pass to the other plugin and the other plugin would like I forgot, but like there was a huge problem there before V1. So we need to like re-architect everything from scratch in order to be able like to fix this like plugin to plugin communication. And also we try to avoid like almost most like 90% of the plugins don't talk to each other. So like there is no communication between plugins, so they only exist by themselves and only exist as one. Like there is no like requirement dependency or anything between plugins, so they only exist as one isolated plugin. And that's what the reason for that was also like to avoid these like interdependence issues that would arise later.
What are the plugins that do have to talk to each other? That does seem like it might get pretty complicated.
For example, the we have an OpenID provider, so there's OIDC plugin. For example, for the OIDC plugin, the JWT plugin need to talk to each other. The JWT plugin has like a JWKS in the point where you can get like the state to validate the JWT. So it will like ask the JWT plugin to validate a token and stuff like that. So like those are the two plugins that I remember like that has to communicate. For the others, it's just like more of like if there's a plugin there, and then they will just do specific thing. They just check like if the plugin exists or not, and do for example, we have a Stripe plugin. So for Stripe plugin, if you have the organization plugin up, it will like add something specific instead of like adding something different. But only like those two plugins have to actually communicate with each other. So far.
Nice. Yeah, that'll be I'm sure that it's a challenge to like keep it that way, but it's probably better for everyone as like things related as possible.
Yeah, like much better. Like we do like, for example, for the Stripe plugin, we have for example, we connect a Stripe customer ID with a reference ID. Reference ID could be an organization ID or a user ID. We could have done like a user ID and then org ID based on the plugin, that you add. But that will just create a bunch of problems for us. And that will just like, we want to avoid like the dependency between plugins as much as we can.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to ask a very specific question. I'm kind of biased in this because this is the only like sharp edge that I've hit with Better-Auth. So one of the hard parts of supporting like multiple databases or whatever is that, and the plugin system that you have, is that a plugin may introduce a new table or a new column or something like that in the database, and you have to keep the schemas up to date despite not controlling the sort of like actual underlying schema or the meta architecture or whatever is being used. So it's like the Prisma or Drizzle schema or whatever. So Better-Auth has a CLI right now that you can run, like migrate and generate to like generate like schema updates or like migrations and stuff. And this is the one area where I've found like some sharp edges. And this is like a common thing in the JS ecosystem, and it's that people do weird things with their build, or in providers have like weird semantics. So one example is like Cloudflare has this virtual module called like Cloudflare : workers, and I found that like right now the Better-Auth CLI like kind of breaks on that, but it's not the only one by any means. This is something that I've sort of griped about a lot on Twitter. So when you're thinking about building tooling like that to like make things easier for people, how do you balance the just like kind of craziness that is the JS ecosystem?
Yeah, very good question. That's very crazy. I think when we built the CLI, the first reason we built the CLI was because, like, again, like I didn't like the idea of when I was using Next.auth, you'd have to copy the schema. For example, they give you like a Prisma schema, Drizzle schema, and all that. You have to copy that to your project. I like never liked that idea. Like I would rather like run something and it would just like have that schema for me. And also, since you have plugins now, like for every plugin, you'd have to copy like every schema for every adapter, and it's just like not sustainable. So we actually needed to make some kind of CLI to make it work, because otherwise it's not gonna work. Uh, so for the edge cases, for example, for I think for Cloudflare, we try to provide the CLI as a. I don't think we have it up on our docs, but for people who ask us every day, everything, we'll tell them like they can use our internal API to call the CLI programmatically, so they don't have to run the CLI. They just can call it programmatically, and then they have their own thing. But that was like, I remember like that was like the first thing that I hit as well. Like I think I was using like OpenNext from DAX SSD. So they also like I was using Cloudflare, and like I wasn't able to run the CLI because I don't have access to the environment variables when I was using D1. So that was challenging, but I think we have workaround there, and I think the team so far has been just me. So like it's now more people will be involved, and we'll have like more guides saying how to do like these small things get right. So hopefully like soon we'll improve like on these small details, especially for the CLI. We want to make that much better, especially now with like sharding. CLIs become more and more like, I don't know, powerful. Like people want to just run the CLI and do things for them. So we want to like make it distributable through CLI commands in the future. So that'll be something that to look for.
Nice. Yeah, it's a great tool. It's just like hit these edge cases, and I think this is not, like I said, not the only tool that has had this exact problem. Is like that Cloudflare module has caused me no end of pain, even though it improves on a lot of the DX for Cloudflare. So I know it's a hard problem, but
yeah, Cloudflare is interesting.
So you have some plugins in here that I would traditionally associate with like paid platforms, and they're just in your open source tool for free. So you have things like organizations and teams, which that's a big hard feature. There's companies built around that. You have SSO, which is again something that like people pay for. So can you tell us like why you chose to include those in the base library? It seems like that's like that would be the first opportunity of like, let's make this a business.
Yeah, I know. Actually, like, I wanted to prove like how much we can just put out as an open source free thing before like. So I always wonder like what is not possible to make open source that like I have to sell. Like there's no way I could provide that as an open source tool from a third party providers that they already charge you for. for example, one SSO connections, most providers will charge you for $100 per connection or something like that. So I was like, why is that like expensive? Like, is there something that's technically challenging to implement as an open source? Like, is there anything there? So I tried to like try to find a thing that I can charge for, and like the reason I asked for a charge is because I I couldn't possibly make it as an open source thing. But literally, I couldn't find anything. I can make everything as an open source thing, and it will still make sense. Like, there's nothing there that actually requires me to ask you for money. So like my goal was like, I'm gonna push this library as much as we can, like to just keep on adding these features. So my goal is like, hey, like anything that we can provide as an open source free thing, like, and unless like it needs some kind of service, we'll just keep on doing that. Like we'll try will not gatekeep anything by making you paid if you can make it open source, and if it can be free and if it can be part of the library. So that was my goal. And like I want to see like if you can support SAML, for example. SAML is like something that big enterprise only want, and it's hard to provide or whatever. But actually, we just put out SAML 2 days ago. I think on Friday we put out SAML support. So the thing is, these things can be provided as free, and like there's nothing that's challenging technically that to do this. And also, like there are actually companies that just provide SAML, right? Like there's a whole company that's just doing SAML, and for me it was like these things can be provided as a library. Even like for Stripe, for example, there are companies just does Stripe implementation. Well, actually, I have a bunch of plugins that's like Stripe implementations, right? I was like, what is about Stripe implementation that we couldn't provide potentially through like the alt setup? So I still want to push as far as I can through the open source, and our commercial offerings gonna be like things that we couldn't provide within the open source thing, and that's like just impossible to do that.
So you didn't find those types of authentication like particularly hard to implement? They were just like kind of another trick in your bag of tricks.
No, I mean they're hard, but like there is like nothing in particular that would make it, a paid product. Like it's just like it's just hard in the sense that you have to write the code for it. Other than that, doesn't matter really regarding like making you paid.
It's interesting that you say this. I feel like there's a lot of companies that they specifically have an information mode, right? It's just like they gate on difficulty, and you could say just hosted authentication providers in general. This is what they're doing. They're like, oh, auth is hard. Don't do it yourself. We'll do it for you. Like they're just gating on the difficulty, and it's interesting as you like push further and further in this area. You're like, no, this is like all very tractable. You can like do all this stuff. You don't actually need a bunch of specialized infrastructure.
Yeah, literally that was like the idea. I was like, how far can we push these things without? I mean, like actually, like the messaging from a third-party provider has been, hey, all these are to implement, you need to outsource it to us, right? And open source providers are not like really something you can trust. And there's like a good team behind them, and like there's a bunch of things that they will tell you to not roll you on auth. Like my idea was like, what if you push these to the limits, right? Like, what if you make open source like as the only alternative, like as actually like as good as whatever third party services out there? Because like there was nothing that's like blocking other than like actually writing the code. Like it's just there's nothing like there are things that you actually need to pay for. For example, let's say I was creating a Stripe. For example, payment. If you create a Stripe, like the actual Stripe, you can't provide that as an open source library, right? Like you need a infrastructure, you need to deal with banks and everything, right? So it's not difficult in the sense that the difficulty is just code. It's not like that, right? Like there's like a bunch of difficulties outside of that. But for the other stuff, it's just mostly code, right? And then if you can distribute it this way, it makes more sense.
So we talk to a lot of folks who are building businesses on open source software or have an open source component of their business, and it's a challenging area. A thing that we've seen, a lot in the industry is like companies like database companies will say, okay, well, our database is our product, but we want the database to be open source so people can interact with it. And then just these licensing things that crop up eventually. We're like, oh crap, Amazon is like hosting our database and like killing our hosting product. So you just recently raised $5 million for your company around this, which congrats, that's a huge milestone. As you're thinking about building a company around Better-Auth, how do you approach, this trade-off of like, okay, we don't want to do an information moat. We want to just make the things that can be done, just with code that people can self-host. We want to make those things free. But like, obviously, at some point, we have to figure out like, okay, what is a sizable product offering that is not something that people can just do themselves? Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think the obvious way for us like to monetize or to create another third-party service. So like if you want to use a third-party service, we have that, but you can use a library, whatever, like that, and we'd be competing with ourselves. But that's like the obvious path to go. But for me, it was like I actually want to push this idea of, hey, you can roll your own auth, and you don't need like these services to, and like that's like kind of my vision. So I don't want to like deflate that by creating another service that you have to pay for, like I said, a third party auth provider. So my idea was like, what if we provide you, for example, security features that you need on top of Better-Auth, right? There are a bunch of security features you need. We have many people who migrate from Better-Auth to, for example, Workplace because they need a specific like if you if you read off, like, for example, the Workplace have a feature called radar. Radar is like this, it will protect you from bots and stuff like that. So many, like, especially AI companies, will migrate from us to Workplace because that they need specific security related features. So my idea was like, what if you provide them like as a service? So like whenever you need those features, you don't have to like migrate from us. You can just like use our service, right? And it would be very natural for you to migrate to like to pay for us because we earned the trust, and also like it's something that we uh like we provide a ton of value, so it makes sense for you to now move a whole auth provider just for that specific features. Also, the base offering is going to be dashboard. So the first thing that we provide you is going to be dashboard that you can manage your users. Uh, so we cannot provide like a very complicated dashboard within the library, but we can provide that as a service. So basically, you'd connect your framework to our dashboard, and you'll be able to create users, ban users, unban users, do all those stuff, admin stuff. Plus, we'll also give you things like, for example, if you see some kind of security feature that we just put out, or if there was some updates you need to update your framework, we'll give you some insights like that. But on top of that, we'll give you a bunch of features that we couldn't provide within the framework as a part of infrastructure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think like there are all of these like out of the case or out of the box like cases that you just like end up having to solve, and there are things that you offer like the admin plugin for Better-Auth is like really good. I imagine that like if you start pushing into like doing a lot of custom authorization rules, right? That could be kind of a challenging space, especially if your authorization rules like rely on integration from a bunch of other systems and stuff. So there's like some interesting problems just like up and down the auth stack. Performance is another thing. I was going to ask earlier, you don't have OTel integration, right? OpenTelemetry.
Yeah, we don't have integration.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a PR for that, so we'll merge
nice.
this. We'll merge this in.
Yeah, at some point, things like that, it's like understanding where the request flow is going and like what plugins
Yeah,
are
exactly.
intercepting things will be.
Exactly, yeah. I think there are many interesting problems to solve, including that. The thing that we have advantage is like we have access to your like we can build a bunch of things because we have access to your like framework and have access to the user object, so you can build a bunch of integrations because that's something that people really. It would be much easier for us to build a bunch of abstraction on top of that. So I think there's a lot to explore. That is not that directly related to providing you another old service because there has been enough.
I think the idea of a product as a plugin or a product as a series of plugins is really interesting. That like you could essentially package and sell like plugins specifically. It's like, oh, you need this feature? Here's this plugin. You pay for it, and all you do is you add it to your Better-Auth config, and away you go.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
The dashboard is going to be like similar to that. Like you add the plugin, and you will be able to like give you a dashboard basically.
Yeah, that sounds super powerful. Definitely like the dream auth library right here. I've had my struggles with many other auth libraries, and they just all don't go far enough and make like seemingly simple things very hard.
Yeah, like I think for example, framework agnostic auth framework, like there was nothing that was framework. I remember like trying to migrate a project from Next.js to Svelte, and it was impossible because like there was nothing in this field that does the same thing as next auth. And I was like, how are we in JavaScript land where like a framework will come like every week, but we don't have a way to do framework agnostic auth? And like it was I think like a fake complexity. It wasn't like when I implemented to make it like when I tried to make it framework agnostic, there was nothing that was like that challenging. It was just, I think this like it was like uh, there was nothing that was complex about making it framework agnostic. It was just like people didn't care enough to make it there. I think auth in general is like a boring problem solve. So like that's why like people don't really try. Like it's better to create another JavaScript framework instead of like an auth library, I guess. But yeah,
Yeah, there was definitely a period there in JavaScript times when everything became framework specific and like the notion of vanilla kind of just
yeah,
went out the window. So it's cool to see you going back towards more vanilla.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I think you've done a lot of really good stuff with it, and I say this with all honesty. This is like the first time I've used an auth framework and be like, oh, this is delightful. This is nice. So
Thank
just
you.
like
That's big.
one of the things that I love a lot is like generating both the routing for the server side and the client. So it's like, oh yeah, here's your client library. It's just like this auth client thing, and you use it, and it automatically is making the API requests to the endpoints that are automatically generated. You don't have to think about, right? You just like, here's the
Yeah,
route, and like take care of it. That's so incredibly powerful. I mean, I had like a little stupid single page app that I integrated it in, and it was like it's just so easy. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is going somewhere.
I remember one of the biggest challenges to actually support hooks. So we have like a use session hook, and that use session hook is actually like a framework agnostic. So you can use it like in every framework. It's not like React specific hook. So there were those type of like even on the client side specific problems like that, and also the typing frames was a problem, right? Like inferring your plugins from the alt server in your alt client and stuff like that. So for example, the reason we have like client plugins is because of that, right? Like we have a client plugins that's to infer templates from the server to your alt client. And yeah, like, it's been incredible to see like how people like I think one of the things that helped me was because like I started making the framework, I wasn't an auth expert, right? Like I wasn't like an expert who had like 10 years of experience working on auth or anything. So I was able like to see like from uh the average developer view. Like I was able to like see how the average developer think, and then like even our documentation was like in that mindset, right? Like if I had years of experience, it would be hard to come up with these abstractions, and I think that was one of my advantages to implement Better-Auth.
So you guys ship a lot of code. I'm looking at the change log here. They're very big change logs. What are you guys working towards in the future? Is there a V2 on the horizon? Do you have stuff you want to change?
Yeah, V2 is gonna be like soon. Not soon, but probably like at the end of this year, we will have like V2. Uh, Before that, like for example, we'll have like a separated uh, plugins architecture, so you cannot install like specific plugin at a specific version if you want to. So we'll have something like that, but nothing particularly that like huge. I think as an auth library, you want to like stay stable, so you don't want to like change a bunch of things like every day. So like we want to like keep as compatible and as backward compatible as we can, and but there are a bunch of small things that we need to fix and we need to get right. So we'll just keep working on them for a while. Also, we're working on the dashboard, the infrastructure side. So that would be our focus as well. So those two things, like getting the small details right, and also keep on building the infrastructure is going to be our focus.
Nice, that's exciting. Well, um, I mean, Better-Auth is an incredible library, and it's been awesome to watch the progression. And y'all are moving super fast because there's definitely been times where it's like, oh, I wish this feature existed. And like next week, it exists now. It's like, it's been, I don't know, just delightful to follow along on that journey.
Thank you.
So just as you think about like, I don't know, as you think about like the future of this space of like thinking about auth, are there any like major advancements that you'd like to see, or is there anything that you're like waiting for? It's like, oh, I can't wait for like browsers to like stabilize this API, or like, I don't know, like is there anything that you're particularly excited in the future?
I would say like I'm excited about like how agent auth would work. So like right now, especially with agent auth, you still need humans to get involved with the MCP auth spake. You need a human to actually authenticate, and then they will be able to store the access token. And that's how it works. But I feel like there is a future where this wouldn't be needed, where like the agents can actually authenticate themselves. They can like do stuff for you. Especially after I saw like recently the agents release from OpenAI, they launched recently. Like I was like, if when you ask the AI to do something for you, if you have to sit there and authenticate for it, it wouldn't be nice, right? It would be much nicer if they can just actually authenticate there. I feel like there is some kind of thing to be innovated there, some kind of thing that needs to come out in that space. We could be us, or like it could be someone, but I feel like there is something there, and that's something that I'm really interested in trying to explore these days. Yeah, I'll try like a very interesting take. This could be solved by someone like one password instead of like an auth provider. Uh, I was thinking in terms of that, but I feel like that is an interesting space to think about regarding like how agents will authenticate with for you and do stuff for you.
Interesting. Yeah, that seems like there's a lot of hard problems to solve there. Cool. Well, that wraps it up for our questions this week. Thanks for coming on. This was a fun dive into Better-Auth, and I personally am excited to use it on a side project when I get the chance. So thanks for coming on and talking about it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Yeah, thanks, Beka. This has been. It's really It's the first thing that I install on any serious project that I do now, and like that's as high as praise as I can give. I mean, it's went from like, oh, this is cool to like, oh, I must use this. So
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, expect like more things from us, and we'll keep on like think active and ship more code going forward. Yeah.
can't wait to see what you do next.